Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar today. This is Megan Tyke. I am the lead client manager for change.org on the West Coast. I work with a lot of our organizations that run sponsored campaigns on the site to help them find and connect with new donors and advocates and then onboard them to their organization. And I'm really excited to be joined by Gwen from Indiegogo, who's going to be chatting with us as well today. So Gwen, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Megan. Hello, everyone from muggy afternoon here in New York. I'm with Indiegogo. We are the oldest and largest crowdfunding platform, and I specifically lead our work in social impact, working with nonprofits, social entrepreneurs, philanthropists, and corporations, helping them leverage crowdfunding for good. Excited to be here.
So cool. I'm really pumped about all the great content that we have to share today. So before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you all have questions as we're going, please do feel free to drop them in the chat. We have some time at the end to go over any questions that you might have and hopefully answer all of them. And we can take a few along the way as well. And also, we're going to be tweeting, and we hope that you'll sort of follow along the hashtag, which is move2action. So definitely chime in with your thoughts as we're going. So to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about today, here's our agenda. So I'm going to be discussing how you find and cultivate your community, especially using storytelling. So how is it that you can build that group of people who are ready and eager and engaged to take action on behalf of your organization. And then Gwen is going to share some really fantastic best practices on how you can activate that community, specifically around fundraising, because we all know we need to keep the lights on, so that's generally a pretty high priority for most organizations. So we'll be talking specifically about crowdfunding and other fundraising campaigns, but giving you some takeaways as well so you can use those in advocacy campaigns too. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling first. And storytelling is a really huge part of the work that we do at Change specifically. And the first part of finding your community, the first step is really telling your organization's story. And the reason that stories are so important is that they put a human face to the work that you are doing with your organization, and it really creates a deeper connection with your audience. So when you think about an issue like world hunger or poverty, it can feel very overwhelming psychologically, and it often doesn't feel like one person can make a difference in that big issue, just a drop in the bucket. But when you think about helping one person who's a part of that issue, so maybe helping one person lift themselves up out of poverty and making that connection on a human level, then it really motivates someone to want to make a difference because you can see how your action will make an impact. So an example of telling a story about a big, broad issue to incite action is this amazing campaign, which was run through an organization that we work with called the United Nations Foundation. And it was a couple years ago, but I still just love this example. And this is the story of a young man named Dennis who had contracted polio when he was young, but then he grew up and was still able to participate in the Paralympic Games, which is pretty incredible. So when you think about an issue like ending polio, which is sort of a really big, broad topic to tackle, that can feel really overwhelming. But when you put a human face to that issue and think about how Dennis's life was impacted, it helps you understand exactly what the issue is, and it gives you a way to help by supporting him in his campaign. So that's an example of really taking a broad issue and then bringing it down and boiling it down into a personal narrative. So at Change, we have a couple different ways that we sort of categorize storytelling. And these might ring a bell, they might be sort of familiar, and they might also start the juices flowing when you're thinking about what kind of stories your organization has to tell. So the 4 kinds of storytelling that we talk about are David and Goliath is the first one. And that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. So that's the little guy going up against the big guy with all bets on the big guy, and then, everyone wants the little guy to win. Then there's righting a wrong. So that's when some injustice happened to someone, usually by maybe a big corporation. So it's things like bank fees that maybe have gotten out of hand, and having one person stand up and say, hey, this isn't right, telling the story about how to make it better. Then there are protection campaigns and stories, and these have to do with protecting vulnerable populations. So that it could be children, it could be animals, things like that, where a group is sort of stepping up and showing their support for protecting the rights of a more vulnerable group of people or animals. And then there's aspirational stories, and those are stories that just they explain the way that we want the world to be and give us motivation to reach that new world where things are right. So thinking about those categories of stories, then each one of those, you can break it down into really a couple of best practices for stories continuing to be strong. So when we think about what makes a really good story, and you sort of know when you hear it, but some of the qualities that a good story has. So first of all, making it short and pithy. When you think about people's attention spans, you might have their eyeballs for 3 seconds, especially when they're coming to your site, if they're coming to change, to look at a campaign. You need to grab them right out of the gate and pique their interest so that they continue reading and they don't just continue clicking on to the next site. Being thoughtful and authentic are also really important. Stories can, if they're too long, if they have too many details in them, they can often feel a little bogged down or too long. But being authentic means that you're telling the story like from the heart, and it has to do with your organization's personality too. So thinking about how you can communicate the work that you're doing and doing it in a way that engages your audience. The second thing is to end on a high note too. It's always really easy to tell a story about some horrible tragedy or something that's going wrong in the world and leaving it at that. But if you want to keep your audience engaged and excited to help you solve the problem that you're telling the story about, you need to end on a high note and get them motivated, show them what the world could look like if that problem is going to be solved. And then also showing them how they can help too. Making it really clear the value proposition of what an audience can do, like how does their signature on this campaign, how is it going to help solve this problem? What are the concrete steps that they can do? If they call their congressman, what is that going to help accomplish? So being really clear about what their impact can be, and that'll help people stay motivated as well. I have another example here from an organization that we work with called Make It Work. And ultimately, when we're talking about how to tell a good story, the goal is that it will inspire action in someone. And there are a couple different ways that that's going to be the case. This example I love. First of all, you can see it's really short. So this was an email. They get right to the point. They have the hook right up front. It's about a woman named Ashley Provino who went to court to fight for her right to, she was a mom who needed time to breastfeed when she was at work. She got fired. And this organization took her story and made it the keystone of a larger action to protect the rights of working mothers. So right away, you can see that it's like a righting a wrong kind of story. And everyone empathizes with Ashley. You can see the struggle that she's gone through. And it also tells you exactly what they want you to do. And you click through, they give you a couple of different ways to click through and add your name to support. And the thing that I love about this when it comes to inspiring action too is at the very end, the way that they end this email. If we all speak up, then something is going to happen. And say you're standing with Ashley. It's that really strong motivational call to action language. So I think this is a really great example of using a story to illustrate a big, broad issue, which is the rights of working moms. And you distill it to the single person, the experience that Ashley had. You can start to empathize with her, and then it creates that feeling of inspiring action to do better. So a really important part of storytelling is not to leave people hanging. Cliffhangers are really great when it comes to Grey's Anatomy or Scandal or any one of those kind of TV shows. But when it comes to stories about work that your organization is doing, you always want to close the loop, especially if people are taking action on your behalf. Don't forget to tell them what happened. It seems really simple, but it can often get lost in the shuffle because A lot of organizations are working on a number of different campaigns at any given time. Maybe one closes and you didn't send out an email to thank everyone for their participation. That definitely happens. So make it a priority to keep people engaged at all levels of the story. So if you're looping them in at the very beginning and asking them to take action to start, make sure that you don't let it fall off the face of the earth and not communicate with them for 6 months, even if the campaign is sort of in a lull. Keep them engaged throughout. So maybe it's sending an update with a press hit that had to do with the campaign that you're working on. Maybe it's a video to keep them engaged and excited. Whatever it is to sort of remind them that they're along for the ride with you is a really great way to keep them engaged. And then at the end, they're going to feel like they were a part of the victory because they were. And it's especially important to show them how their actions helped achieve the victory that you're celebrating. So next we want to talk a little bit about testing, which is another huge part of the work that we do here at Change. And our motto is ABC, always be testing. Chances are if you took a guess at what kind of subject line or image or color button in your email was going to resonate with your audience, you're probably going to guess wrong. 95% of the time, your gut is probably just not going to be the best way to figure out that information. And we always like to rely on data. And the best way to get that data and figure out what works is to test. So we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can be testing and really hone in on that story and like that strong narrative to help your audience feel engaged to the work that you're doing. So I have a couple examples here. So this is a campaign that was run on our site, and it was a legislative action in Oregon to require background checks. So the organization wasn't quite sure how to message about this advocacy action. So they took two different approaches. So you can see one of them, these are both for the same bill. They both have the same outcome. They're just framed differently. One is about domestic abuse victims, and so keeping guns out of the hands of their abusers. And the other came from the perspective of the safety of children in their homes. And so it ultimately, you're signing, it's the same campaign, you're asking Congress, the Oregon State House to achieve the same goal. It's just framed in a different way. So I'm actually curious to know what everyone on the call thinks won. So they had these two different angles. Do you think that the campaign that was about domestic abuse resonated more, or do you think it had to do with children in the home? Actually, Gwen, what do you think did better?
That's a tough one. I'm going to have to just guess domestic abuse.
I know, it's really a tough one. It looks like we have a lot of people who are guessing children in the home, actually. So I'll give everyone 5 more seconds to place their vote. Oh my gosh, that's like a resounding winner. All right, you guys, so this is, I guess, an opportunity where when you went with your gut, you were correct, because it was actually the story about children in the home actually performed about 2 percentage points higher than the story about domestic abuse. So it was a really great example of taking some time. If they had gone out strictly with a domestic abuse framing on this issue, they might not have gotten as many people to sign. But the fact that they took the time to test these different angles really helped them figure out what resonated with their audience. So another example in terms of testing, this is so simple, but it actually makes a really big difference. So at first glance, it might look like these are totally identical campaigns that were run on Change. But if you take a closer look at the headlines, you'll see that there's one word that was changed. So the top one is keep harmful chemicals out of our family's products, and the bottom one is keep harmful chemicals out of American families' products. So they wanted to test this language and see which resonated better with their audience, which was going to get more signatures. So again, let's see if everyone can get this one correctly as well. It's a super subtle change. Gwen, what do you think this one is?
I selected American.
Interesting. Ooh, this one's a lot closer. A lot more people voting for American than our. So this one was really close when it came to the results. It wasn't quite a resounding victory, but the winner was actually our, which I think was interesting because I think it showed, like, it makes you a part of the story. It incorporates you because you can include your family in that. So when you want to keep chemicals out of American families, that feels a little third person impersonal when you want to keep them out of our families. That's all of us banding together in order to right this wrong. Good job, guys. All right, so when you're thinking about testing different variables in your campaigns, that sort of thing, these are a couple ideas specifically around campaigns on change. We always have organizations test different images and campaign headlines to see what resonates best. But when you're thinking about your stories, whether you're using email or social media to kick these out and test different things, you can always think about making them short versus a little bit longer. Maybe your audience does have a really long attention span and they want all the details on a story. Maybe your audience wants, right off the bat, they want to know exactly what the story is in a sentence or two, and you have to condense it. So testing that, and also testing the tone of the story too. Again, this is all going to depend on who the audience is, but testing good news, so having like a really warm and fuzzy story versus maybe something that's a little more scary, a little bad news that maybe motivates people to want to change that. Different hooks that you can get people into include shock. So you could start with a shocking statistic, something like 1 out of every 5 people does X, Y, and Z that no one would ever know about. And that can loop people in and get them interested and want to read more because maybe it's something they'd never heard before. Versus using a personal narrative, which is what we saw in that example back there from Make It Work, which is all about Ashley's story. It's also really important to test your call to action language. So figure out what makes people click. Maybe it's take action now. Maybe it's add your name. Maybe it could be any variation of those. So making sure that you're testing little variables like that can really help boost your conversion rates. So when you're thinking about testing, it's really important to always test at least one variable. Make sure that you're testing something. Maybe it's a subject line, maybe it's an image, things like that. It's also important to track your results because otherwise you won't know what's working. It's really important to keep that institutional knowledge for your organization. If one person is running these tests and they keep it all in their heads, that might not be the best way to manage your data. So make sure that you're tracking it in a document that people have access to. And that is also going to lead to the third point, which is defining success. Like make sure you know what kind of open rate or click-through rate, what is it that your goal is? Because if you don't know what success is going to be when you're testing, then you're probably not going to reach it. So make sure that you have a goal set out as soon as you start doing these tests. So finally, now that you have these people looped in, they're like really excited about the work that you're doing because you told this great story and got them really engaged. You honed in on exactly the right way to tell that story through testing different variables on it. You've got the magic going. They're on your list. They're ready for more. It's really important to establish that relationship with them and make sure that these new supporters feel like they're part of your community right off the bat. And the best way to do that is through a good old-fashioned welcome series, which we love talking about here at Change. So I'm going to show you an example of a welcome series that one of our clients sent out and talk about some of the best practices there, but we also will follow up with more resources on this if you're interested. But it's really important when someone joins your list, no matter where they came from, that you take the time to segment them out of your normal list and send them a couple emails to onboard them and introduce your work and your organization, and so they get a sense of what kind of communication they're going to be getting from you. So let's dive into the example here. It's from an organization called Autism Speaks. So the way that this worked was people signed a campaign on Change. They opted in to hear more from Autism Speaks. And then Autism Speaks started sending out emails to onboard these new supporters. And this is the first email. What it does, a couple of great things. The first thing is up at the top, it acknowledges where this person signed the petition from. So they're not thinking, wait, where did this person get my email from? Oh, that's right, I signed the petition on Change and they got my email address. So acknowledging that right off the bat is a great way to establish legitimacy. It gives them one discrete action to take, which is watch that video. It's very simple. It introduces the work that Autism Speaks does. It's very short. It's just like a small, simple way to keep someone engaged and clicking and excited about the work that they're doing. This is also a really brief email, as you can see. It gets straight to the point. It just has the video. And that's pretty much the first email that they use to loop people in. Then the second email, which was sent a couple days later, also had one discrete action, which was essentially connect with us on social media. So they're trying to build their communities on Facebook and Twitter, and what I love about this one in particular is you can see that they have that value proposition there. A lot of times you'll get these emails that say, you should follow us on Facebook and Twitter, but they don't say what you're going to get out of it. So you can see in that bottom paragraph, they tell you what you can expect when you do join their social media communities. It's helpful information, hear about news at events, get stories from real families, that sort of thing. So I love that little touch that they had. And again, it's that one action. It's very easy for their audience to do, and it keeps them, it sort of finds them on a different channel so that they can continue to connect. This is the third email. So this is going to be a series of 5. So this is the 3 out of 5, and this is a survey link, which is a really great tool to have at your disposal in your welcome email because, again, there's that one action that they ask people to take. You'll notice that the only link is to the survey. People love talking about themselves and sharing information about themselves. So if you give them an opportunity to share their opinions, chances are you're going to get a lot of great information back from your audience. And the survey can have questions about what kind of information they want to hear from you, maybe what their experience with autism was, if they have a personal connection. Anything that lets people share their connection to your organization is going to get a really high engagement rate. So I think that's a really great tool to include in your welcome series there. And then the fourth email was they sort of ran this campaign in the lead up to a National Day of Action, which was on April 2nd. And they let people click there on that link to get involved in that National Day of Action. The data lighted up blue, and it gave them information about how they could get involved. It gave them a couple of ideas, whether you're wearing a blue T-shirt, swapping in a blue light bulb, things like that. And it also, again, mentioned the petition on change, which is really great to remind people, again, where you're getting their email from, which can be an important note. Then the final email, which was really great timing because they timed all these welcome emails to culminate on World Autism Awareness Day. So people already knew it was coming up. They had already clicked through to sign up and participate. And this was just a way to take that impact further, and it actually asked people to donate. And there's a lot of back and forth about whether fundraising asks in a welcome series are a good idea or not. The best piece of advice I have for that is to test it. A lot of times that's a great opportunity to ask someone to get further involved in your organization by donating because they're really excited about you. They're beginning this relationship. They're like super excited to have signed your petition. They're engaged. So why not ask? But again, that's a really great thing to test. But it's usually a smart thing to include in that welcome series. So when you're thinking about your strong welcome series, a good rule of thumb is to include about 3 or 5 emails, generally sent over about 2 to 3 weeks. And again, you might want to test this and see what your audience, what they respond to best. Also, we talked about this a couple times, but including that one discrete action. So maybe it's watch the video, maybe it's donate, maybe it's get involved on that National Day of Action. And then the final thing is to send it as soon as you can after someone joins. So as soon as you get their email address on your list, make sure that you're sending out the welcome wagon and getting them involved so that they know that they're a really integral part of your community right off the bat. The more time that goes by, the better chances are that they'll have forgotten that they signed up to get that email. So strike while the iron's hot and send that out as soon as you can. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and actually hand it over to Gwen, who's going to talk about now that you have this amazing community and they're all cultivated and excited about your work, how is it that you can activate them to fund that campaign?
Great, thank you, Megan. And I just want to start, part of the reason why we're such big fans of Change.org here at Indiegogo is one of the biggest mistakes that every campaigner makes on Indiegogo is that they can just throw a campaign on our platform, even though it has a massive global audience. They just think that elves or fairies would just come and start contributing to the campaign instantly. It's almost never the case. You always need to be able to see the momentum of your campaign with your existing community. So the work that Change does in helping you identify what that community is and to give you amazing tools such as A/B testing and input to continuously build a strong relationship with this community. I think it's absolutely pivotal to help you see the momentum of a successful Indiegogo campaign. It could be from as little as a $500 campaign to a $12 million campaign on Indiegogo. It's that momentum from your existing community that's really going to be the greatest driver to your success. So for today, I want to walk you through some key best practices and how to frame and execute a successful fundraising campaign. Now, this can go beyond crowdfunding, but mostly I'm going to be focusing on online fundraising. So how do you leverage this community that you've built that is super engaged and dedicated to your work from your change survey? The first step is you've got to have a compelling pitch. And with the pitch, you want to focus on impact, not mission, but impact. And I think Megan touched upon this as well. So the more concrete you can be with your goal, what is it that you're fundraising for? What is the impact that every dollar is going to help generate is going to be key. So instead of saying we want to bring education to Vietnam. Explain, okay, great, we're going to raise $100,000 to build one school, and it's going to address 5,000 kids in this specific city in Vietnam. The more concrete you can be when it comes to that impact, the more success you're going to find in your campaign and the more engagement you're going to find from your community. And what we also find to be extremely effective on Indiegogo is to have a very concrete video to complement your pitch. Campaigns with videos raise about 4 times more than campaigns that don't. So basically your video should be about 3 minutes or less and addresses the big questions of the campaign. Why is this project important and urgent? How is your solution unique? And what can the community do to participate to further this goal or further this impact? And lastly, you have to know your audience. Good thing is you just ran an awesome change survey, so you've been able to do a lot of testing to understand fully what messages resonate with your audience the most. So in general, with all of our campaigns on Indiegogo, we've seen 4 reasons why people typically give. First is simply your mission. They really identify with the work that your organization does and really want to help you further this purpose. Secondly, it's because the people or the person or the organization is asking them to give. This is an entity that they recognize and trust. And thirdly, it's participation. And this is where the crowd really comes into play and really shifts the paradigm of how a donor can participate in a cause. It's not just about sending in a check or making a one-time contribution, but they see and recognize that they are part of a much larger movement beyond themselves to make something greater happen. So that participation component alone can be a major driver to get a donor in the door for your organization. And lastly, it's incentives through perks. This is entirely selfish, and people do give to charities for selfish reasons. It's because they get something in return. And I'll dive into that incentive component later as well. But I want to show you a pitch video by one of my favorite campaigns on Indiegogo, and it really has all of the key ingredients of an effective pitch video.
People of Kentucky, you deserve complete honesty. So here it is. I don't care about you. Unless you are a donor or a lobbyist who can write a big fat check, the results that you get from voting for me, it's negligible.
Politicians don't actually say these things, but in today's political climate, this is what they're doing. We have a critical problem in this country. Money has completely corrupted the political process.
All our legislators do is raise money. That's all they do.
That's really what bribery is, but it is done every day.
The system is corrupt.
The system isn't corrupt.
No. The system has been utterly overrun by moneyed interest. Your Congress is bought. Your Congress is incapable of making legislation on healthcare, banking, trade, or taxes.
I'm with a nonpartisan anti-corruption campaign called Represent Us, and we're setting out to make fixing corruption America's #1 issue. That's where honest Gil Fulbright comes in. What up, Gil?
What's up, babe?
Gil is the first honest politician. He'll never tell a lie. He's also fake. We're sending Gil to Kentucky to run in the Senate race against Mitch McConnell and Allison Lundergan Grimes. He's going to crash campaign events, give speeches, run ads on TV, and do whatever it takes to get people talking about fixing our corrupt political system. Control of the U.S. Senate could come down to this race, so everyone's going to be watching. It's the perfect opportunity for us to get national press on this issue. Also, the Kentucky Senate race is going to cost $100 million. $100 million. That's the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. And 3/4 of both candidates' money is coming from outside of Kentucky, from special interests, and to both sides of the aisle.
Financial institutions donated over $1.6 billion to politicians last election cycle. And as your senator, I'm going to take that money, and I'm going to give them unfair advantages over people like you.
I'm from Kentucky, so this is personal for me. I really want to be able to fix the problems with my home state. But still, it's not just about one place. Every congressional campaign has millions of dollars flowing into it, and you better believe the people putting that money in want something in return. Still, no one's talking about this issue. So we're sending honest Gil Fulbright to Kentucky.
So this summer, I'll be driving a big bus around Kentucky telling all the folks who happen to live there everything I won't be doing for them.
Satire works, especially when teaching people about campaign finance reform. We need a new way to talk about this issue, to get national media attention and to educate people about the corruption that's paralyzing our government. This campaign can drive hundreds of thousands of Americans to join the growing movement to pass tough new anti-corruption laws all across America. This will be our biggest campaign yet. Right now we have just under 500,000 active supporters. By November, we're gonna push that number to 1 million, but we can't do it without your help.
I'm Gil Fulbright. For the right price, I'll support any message.
Good work.
Great. So I hope everyone enjoyed that video and picked up some good tips and best practices from there. You might have noticed there are a number of graphics included in the pitch video. Now, it's certainly not required. We have seen multi-million-dollar campaigns that had pitch videos that people literally filmed with the webcam on their laptops or the cameras on their iPhones. What matters the most is not the quality of the production, but it's the messaging of your video that is most critical. So you don't have to have a big budget to put together an effective pitch video. So secondly, let's dig a little bit deeper into the incentives around an effective fundraising campaign. As I mentioned, perks is really one of the top 4 reasons why we've seen people contribute to causes on Indiegogo and other categories of campaigns as well. So what are the different types of perks that you can offer? Acknowledgement is a very common one within nonprofit organizations. It could be as simple as a thank you, to really creative ways to make your donors feel a sense of pride in participating to help this project come to life. And I can go through those examples in a bit. Secondly, is digital and tangible products. So digital ways and digital items that you can send over to your donors over the internet that doesn't really cost anything to produce and to ship, to very physical products that you can send to their homes. And then lastly are exclusive experiences, and I would have to say this one is my favorite, and it probably has the greatest conversion across our campaigns, depending on what the experience is. But the more exclusive you can make these experiences, the more money you can raise. So meaning you can only capture this specific experience if you donate to our Indiegogo campaign. You can't get this experience anywhere else. So on the acknowledgement side, these are perks by an organization called the Harry Potter Alliance. It is a real nonprofit. They've been around for 10 years now and have millions of super fans of the Harry Potter series, and they activate their fan base to fight for human rights, equality, and literacy around the world. So one of their programs is a operating library, which is a mobile library where members can contribute, books that have inspired them to the library, and it travels along with the organization with every conference that they put on. And then there's also an online database that allows you to tap into it and rent these books online. So at a smaller contribution level on their Indiegogo campaign, they would send their donors these library cards as a thank you for contributing. And it also enabled the donor to have access to their online database to search for what books are available that could be coming into their town because there's a local event. And then, so the second example is, Darren Criss is a superstar on a popular TV show called Glee, and at a higher level, he'll send you a personalized holiday card to thank you for your contribution. So these are just really quick examples of ways to acknowledge your donors for contributing to your campaign. On the digital and tangible product side, again, another set of perks from the Harry Potter Alliance. And again, I love this organization. They have been so effective in understanding their audience and designing incentives to really engage that audience to not only contribute, but also to share out, to extend the networks of their campaign. So Team Star Kid is a musical production that performs at LeakyCon, which is the biggest gathering of Harry Potter fans around the world. So at $50, they'll send you this exclusive digital recording of Team Star Kid's performance at LeakyCon 2011. It's exclusive because you won't get this anywhere else. If you didn't go to LeakyCon, you won't have a chance to hear this performance. And then they also got Chris Colfer, which is another star from Glee, to autograph a series of his books. And at $115, they'll send you an autographed book by Chris. On the exclusive experience side, this is really interesting. On the right, we have a campaign coming up by Rainn Wilson, who's a former star of the popular show called Office. So at $5,000, he'll fly you to LA and host you for lunch with him and his wife. You can ask him anything you want. The one on the left is JoJo Cruise. This is also a campaign that's currently live in Indiegogo right now. And it's a really interesting tactic. So at a contribution of $5, you'll be entered to win an all-exclusive experience to JoJo Cruise, which is the biggest nerd cruise line around the world. And for every dollar, you get one entry. And with that entry, you answer one trivia question. And at the end of the campaign itself, the organizers of the campaign will select the winner, and the winner will get to go on JoJo Cruise for free. So it's a great way to not only solicit contributions, but also to really engage your audience, to get them a little bit more active with your cause. And of course the trivia is related to their work, and actually this campaign is in support of Heifer International. So lastly, it's about proactive promotions of your campaign. Again, one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make on Indiegogo is they throw a campaign on there and walk away. I would say 85% of a campaign's success is determined before you actually launch your campaign. So it's absolutely key that you plan ahead what your promotions will be. And you're actually going to be promoting your campaign before you launch, to really help see that momentum as soon as you launch your fundraising campaign. So one thing to keep in mind is there are 3 layers of funding from what we've seen over the years at Indiegogo. Each of them make up roughly about 30% of the funds raised on your campaign. First group is your inner circle of supporters. So these are friends, family, and current donors. And then the second group are referrals. They come from referrals from the first group. So talking about online fundraising, right? You have to give your audience a reason to share your campaign to their network so that extends your campaign's reach to second-degree networks and third and fourth, and you name it. And that's how you can then activate finally the crowd, which is the last layer of funding. Mathematically, it's 30%, but really the sky is the limit. We have seen campaigns where they're static at $40,000, and because their campaign went viral, ended up at $2.2 million. So that early momentum positions your campaign to attract more stranger dollars onto your campaign. And I'll extend a little bit further on how you can do that as well. So how do you really capture all 3 layers of this funding? It's about planning ahead. I can't stress that anymore. First step is put together a host committee. Of about 10 people or so who are super passionate about your work. Ask for soft commitments up front and ask for them to share out to their networks. Just like when you run a charity gala, you always have a host committee who buys the tables up front and invite their friends. Same thing, you want to do that for your fundraising campaign. And then email database. In addition to, of course, having social media assets and a website out there, but you want to really focusing on that email list. And the great thing about Change is you have that email database, and going through that welcome email cycle to really build strong relationships with these potential donors is absolutely key, because on Indiegogo, we've seen that emails have the greatest conversion. And then second is Facebook, and third is Twitter. So focusing on building a highly engaged email list is going to be very profitable for your campaign. And then the second tip is how do you grow? So how do you grow your campaign then to second-degree networks and third and fourth? So in addition to activating your audience, you want to leverage other people's audience. So put together a list of influencers, people who especially have really strong social media following, to reach out to those people and have very concrete asks of them. Post 2 times during the cycle of our campaign, or offer a unique perk that resonates most with your community that we can then post on our campaign. Secondly is partners. I'm sure there are other organizations and associations that share a similar mission to yours. Reach out to them and see if they can help promote your campaign. And then have a social media strategy and a press strategy as well. And depending on your work, you might want to be as concrete as reaching out to blogs and local press, all the way to national and international press. And then lastly, you want to keep the momentum of your campaign by having planned updates. So updates are basically news that you are sharing out to your existing community to incentivize them to share out. So it could be a balance between news about your campaign itself and news about your work. So stories about people that you're working with and supporting, maybe donor stories here and there, but it doesn't, and similar to Megan's advice, you want to plan for about making an update every 5 days or so, and for these updates to be very short, to the point, and newsworthy, so that it's easy for people to be inclined to share this news with their friends and family. And that's how you can really keep your fundraising campaign fresh. Great. And 2 additional tips on ways to further engage your community to help activate all of those layers of funding is XPRIZE is a global competition to solve the biggest problems of the world. They ran a referral contest through their Indiegogo campaign that had 500 to 600 people actively sharing their campaign out to their social networks, so they have an opportunity to have an all-inclusive experience at Visioneering, which is the big conference where the X Prize community comes together and vote on next year's problem to solve. So it was a great way to engage not only their donors, but also people who may not have the capacity to give, to be able to simply participate by sharing the campaign to their social networks. And another example to the right is a first-time social entrepreneur. She's actually during her senior year in college, launched this social enterprise that makes dolls that mirrors real-life female role models to teach girls math and science. So through the campaign itself, she was able to gain feedback from her community of supporters on what the next dolls should be. So yes, with Indiegogo, it's a great way for you to raise funds, but what we find is a lot of organizations we work with also leverage the platform to spread awareness about their cause and also as a way to engage their communities much further. So I'm going to hand it back to Megan here on a quick recap.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gwen. That was amazing. I love all of those examples of the campaigns, especially the Harry Potter one. I had no idea that that organization existed. So cool. All right. So just to kind of wrap things up and remind you of some of the highlights that we chatted about when you're building that community, make sure that you're telling your story in an authentic way that gets people's attention and allows them to connect more deeply with the work that you're doing. And the best way to do that is by testing. Don't forget, ABT, always be testing every little element of that story so you can figure out exactly what resonates with your audience. And then remember to establish that relationship. Once people are looped into your work and excited and engaged, make sure that you're welcoming them to your list and giving them a sense for what kind of communication they can expect in the future. And Gwen, what were some of the highlights from yours?
Yeah, so now that you have this super engaged community, best ways to start activating them to help you raise funds, to make a project happen, or to launch a new organization even, is to, one, have a very compelling pitch. Make it very concrete and precise to what the impact is and try to frame that pitch in a video if you can. Secondly is to think about really exclusive and unique incentives that you can offer to your supporters and donors so that they not only contribute but also share out to their community. And lastly, don't just launch a campaign and walk away. You've got to be proactive with how you promote your campaign so that you can really activate all three layers of funding, which are inner circle's referrals, and finally the crowd, which is what most organizations are most interested in, right? You want to bring your cause to as many new people as possible and then maintain a strong relationship with them through the emails that you receive both from Indiegogo and Change so that they become lifetime supporters. So next we're going to open up the webinar to Q&A, and we noticed that a number of questions have already been rolling in through the chat box. Feel free to continue adding your questions there, and we will be answering them one by one in the next 10 minutes.
Awesome. And just real quick, I know a lot of people have been asking about the slides, and everyone's going to get a recording of the webinar afterwards, so you can review it over and over again and get a lot more great value out of it. So we'll be sending that out after we wrap up here. So we have a couple questions already. I see two that are about the testing examples, one from Cynthia. How were the tests done in those examples? So they were sponsored campaigns that were running on change.org, and we have a tool, a multivariate testing tool that allows us to test different images and headlines and shows them to the audience, and then it automatically decides which combination was the highest converting, and it shows that to the remainder of the audience. But in terms of testing, most CRMs have tools so that you can test different subject lines and images when you're sending out emails. You can also create 2 different change campaigns if you're running them on your own. Send them both out through social media, see which one gets more signatures. There's a couple different ways that you can handle that. And actually, Claudia has a similar question. When you test different messages and you test it with your same audience, how long in between do you wait to test each message? So like I said, with the test that I was showing, the tool shows them simultaneously to our audience. So that's a really, it's a great tool for us to have on hand and figure out what resonates best with the audience. But when it comes to things like testing for email, a good rule of thumb is to send a 10-10-80. So if you have one variable, send out one subject line to 10% of your list and the other out to another 10% of your list. Wait a couple of hours until you get statistical significance, and then send whichever performed best to the remaining 80% of your list. So that's a real simple way to test different messages and images within your email platform. So Gwen, you had a couple questions about activating your audience based on your target audience there from Rebecca.
Right. Rebecca, this is a great question. So the question is, how does activating your audience change based on your target audience? For example, if the target was a teen audience, does the conversion rate change based on the touch point, email versus social media? This is a great question. At the end of the day, you want to cater your promotion to your audience. So all of those testing mechanisms that Megan have touched on is very helpful. You might find that, if your audience only lives on social media, then there's no point in doing email. But in general, across the platform, what we do find is emails are more effective because the audiences on email tend to be much more engaged. So, if you look at opting in for an email newsletter versus liking a Facebook page, opting into an email newsletter requires more commitment from an individual. So it's an indicator that they might be more engaged as an audience, and you probably have had more touch points with them. Because they could have just missed your Facebook post over the stream. So, what we do here at Indiegogo is offer oftentimes one-on-one campaign coaching. So if I know a little bit more about your audience and the campaign you're running, I can advise you a little bit more specifically on the best ways to activate that audience. Amy also asked, when forming a host committee, you recommend asking them to commit soft donations. How do you handle this when you're dealing with a disenfranchised, lower socioeconomic audiences? Again, another great question. We often recommend organizations to start like a splash page on their existing website or a new website, or have some type of sign up for donors to opt in to be notified once the campaign is live. And you can always ask them, like, will you contribute at this $25 to perhaps get this perk, or $100? So that would give you, kind of run like a pre-survey before you actually launch to give you a good sense of what people are thinking about as far as their commitment level to the campaign. And that, that could always change depending on, what your ultimate campaign page is going to look like. But it's always helpful just to get that soft yes from people so that they're not surprised and hearing about the campaign for the first time on the day that you launch.
I love that example there, Gwen. It also brings in the testing component to that as well. So kind of testing the waters with your audience to see what they can commit to. Always be testing.
Yes, always be testing. And actually, if you have higher net worth donors, and actually this is a very effective strategy, is for nonprofits on Indiegogo, you do have the option of wiring funds of $10,000 or greater per transaction to leverage as perhaps a matching grant on your Indiegogo campaign. So oftentimes when I talk about setting up a host committee, I always encourage organizations to ask these high net worth donors to convert their soft commitments into matches on the Indiegogo campaign, because we have instant matching. So meaning when you have a live match and I donate $10, I will see that $20 is going directly towards the organization, and it's all instantaneous. So that doubling the impact and instant gratification will help with the momentum of the campaign.
Awesome, that's so cool. So we have two other questions about welcome series, specifically from Diana and Victoria. And we have a couple more minutes, so if you do have any last minute questions as we're answering these, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So Diana asked, do you recommend such a lengthy welcome series like Autism Speaks, and what is the length of time between emails? In general, here at Change, we recommend sending about 3 to 5 emails in that welcome series over the span of about 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a couple days in between each one. And again, each audience for each organization is unique and different and responds in different ways. So this is a great thing to test with new people as they're joining your list, and see which emails get the highest open rates. If you see a drop-off in click-throughs, maybe on the 3rd email, maybe 3 is the right number of emails for you to send. So there are some parameters that we recommended for best practices, but when it comes to like specifics, each audience is different. So definitely test it out and see what works best. And Victoria asked, what is the length of time between emails? And do you send the next email only if people took action on the last email? And I love the second part of that question, is really important. And we recommend continuing to send that email even if they didn't take action, if they didn't open it, because you never know if maybe it got lost in their day and they just accidentally deleted it, and you might miss out on an opportunity for them to actually be taking action on the next email. So unless they're unsubscribing, I would recommend continuing to send them those welcome emails, and you might catch them, maybe they only check email every other day. You never know. So don't miss out on that chance to get them to stay involved. Great. So were there any other questions that we had here?
I believe there's one from Patrice. If you don't make your goal, can you continue your campaign? Yes. So on Indiegogo, you have 2 options of a fixed funding or a flexible funding model. With fixed funding, is you have to meet your goal, otherwise you don't receive any of the funds. With flexible funding, and actually that's the default model for all of our nonprofit campaigns, meaning every dollar raised is yours regardless of whether or not you meet your goal. So, and we also have an option in which once you do meet your goal, you have the opportunity to roll into in-demand, which enables you to continue to receive funding on your campaign even though you're not actively doing the outreach and promotion of your campaign. So it's a great way to capture ongoing, lingering traffic onto your Indiegogo campaign page.
Perfect. All right. I think with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. Gwen, thank you so much for joining us. Those examples that you shared and those best practices are so useful. It's been really, really great. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Megan. Your presentation was fantastic. They were very helpful, and I would have to say a lot of the best practices in storytelling and testing reminds me of best practices that we also share with organizations that work with us on Indiegogo. I think Change in Indiegogo, the user experience creates a very interesting loop. Identify that community and build a strong relationship with that community to help see the momentum of your Indiegogo campaign, which then allows you to attract more strangers to your organization to grow that community. So thank you so much for inviting us to join this webinar, and it's been a pleasure. And my email address is also on the last slide of this presentation, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Definitely. Yeah, feel free to reach out to anyone at Change or Indiegogo. Here you have our contact information. Check out the hashtag for other conversations that were happening during the last hour. And we'll be following up with a recording of the webinar, so feel free to share that with your colleagues if you think they might be interested in it. And thank you all so much for spending your Tuesday with us, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon and evening.